Hi, folks. Welcome
What's
back to the
up?
Big Dudes in the Trenches podcast. It's been a minute. How y'all been?
It's been more than a minute. It's been about 3 months.
Couple months. Yeah. So we had. Do we even want to talk about it? It is what it is. We're back now.
We're sorry we left. We got the milk. We came back. We just like we promised.
Yes. Milk was surprisingly hard to find in this Joe Biden economy. Yeah, we're back now. Oh man, so a lot has happened in the meantime of when we stopped having the show. For example, EA Sports College Football is out now. Very exciting stuff.
Yes, it is.
I've
I
been
will.
streaming it to our Discord for some reason.
I will gladly and proudly say it is not a Madden reskin. I'm
Yes.
very happy to be wrong.
Yeah.
That said, there's some times where it feels a little clunky. And I don't. If you've played it, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't played it, it's really. I don't know that's necessarily the best way to explain it, but that's how I'm explaining it.
It's interesting. I will say, in defense of the clunkiness, collegiate defenders are not usually very good. So for them to not be very good in the game maybe makes it more realistic.
And I'll say this, as far as the collegiate defenders not being the best and there being just random blown coverages, I'm totally fine with that. That's how college football is. It's little unpredictable. Sometimes they're right on. Sometimes somebody completely slips and completely fucks it away.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I do when I play Madden, where it's just I can't stop anything.
Right.
These plays just sometimes happen. I've pulled off some of those plays as well. So I'm
really
excited.
Cool. I love the new passing mechanic, which does alleviate some of my frustrations about Madden, where I know the way this route is, if I lob the ball there, it should go over the defender instead of having an opportunity for the linebacker to jump 7 feet in the air, which doesn't happen in college football 25. So that's great. Love that. Control with passing. Kicking is weird. Gonna take some getting used to. I've missed some pretty dumb kicks that I shouldn't be missing.
Yeah, and, I feel like the overkick punishment is a little brutal. Like,
it is,
especially on PATs from 15 yards away.
Yeah, that was one of my bad misses. One of my other bad misses was a field goal that was 23 yards out, and again, little overpower penalty shanked it for me. But I also think that's more accurate than where Madden you're going to make 100% of all your PATs unless you intentionally mess it up. The college kickers are not as good as NFL kickers, so there's something to be said for it.
Yeah, and we're saying this, and part of it is it's new. It's the first time we've had college football since 2013 when NCAA 14 came out. I don't want to. We're giving the game its shine, but I wonder how much this stuff's just going to become frustrating. Of like, hey, it's a video game. Like, it's supposed to be simulation. This stuff shouldn't happen. I worry that potentially this will come down the line when the newness and the excitement wears off, because I've seen it happen with pretty much every other sports game that's come out. MLB being the most notorious year in and year out.
Yeah, of course. And I am already starting to get sick of there's only like 3 animations for Brutus at the shoe. He does one of 3 things every time. And I've seen the same fan at basically every stadium in at least one of the shots. There's the same guy with the same haircut in just a different color t-shirt at every stadium. So there is some of that going on. It is still it's a video game. It is what it is.
It is interesting too. I do feel like there's a little bit where they didn't go as hardcore into some of the graphical details as they could have, but I do think by and large that the gameplay is better for it. You don't see yourself getting as hooked onto your offensive linemen as normally as you would. They don't seem like completely immovable and
Right.
also completely worthless at the same time, like we've seen in Madden for the past 5 or 6 years. It seems like there's a lot more physics going on all over the field versus just what's right in front of you and what you can control. Oh,
Well, I
and
will
there's
say,
breeze on the field.
Florida's defensive tackles are brutal. If you're playing as Kentucky and you go against Florida, you're going to have a very hard time running the ball, which, again, maybe that's a little bit realistic. But holy smokes, that offensive line sucks. Anyway, the stadiums look great. I'm noticing all the little details. Like, obviously, I live in Louisville, went to the University of Louisville, been to many a U of L football game. That stadium looks dead on. That is exactly what it looks like in real life. The shoe looks bang on, except for the names of the players on the ring, where they have Heisman Trophy winners of Ohio State. They have their number and their name. They don't have licenses for those names, so it's just their number and then go Bucks. Which I'm okay with that, right? They still have that detail in there, and if you know the stadium, you know what that's supposed to be anyway. And it's kind of I get it. That's all right.
I am curious if they'll eventually get those licenses. I'm also curious at how much they're going to drop on this day one update, because it certainly
Sure.
feels like there's plenty of stuff to come down the line.
There's plenty of
And
bug fixes too.
yeah, and at we're playing in this pre-release time, technically pre-order, bonus, early access, whatever you want to call it. So I imagine come actual release day, we'll see some relatively significant changes coming down the pipe.
Probably not. I think you're giving them too much credit. Most likely not.
We'll see. We'll see. But I've enjoyed it so far. I've only played one play now game. It was the Battle of the Bones, Memphis versus UAB, where of course we played at the Liberty Bowl. And like you said, stadium spot on. I can picture every single seat in that stadium, and seeing it filled up was probably the only non-realistic thing about that play now game.
Dude, I was just playing at Miami with my Kentucky Road to Glory, and it was full stadium, and I was like, "Oh, that's not right at all." It was the number 14 hardest place to play 3 years deep in this Road to Glory. That's not right either.
Yeah, and they obviously haven't updated all the damage that the Colombian soccer fans did to Hard Rock Stadium, because the Dolphins are really pissed off about that.
It was really cool, though. I did a play now of Ohio State and Illinois, which, if you don't know, because they haven't played in 7 years, that is a rivalry, technically. They play for the Illinois Trophy, which is a wooden turtle. And the announcers talked about the history of that rivalry and like the history of the trophy and all that kind of stuff. It was actually really cool. I knew all the history because, of course, I did. But hearing them talk about it in the game was really awesome. And so I'm hoping that other rivalries get that same treatment, and I'm sure they do, where it's like, if you don't know the history of the team that you're in a dynasty with, you're going to learn about that school. And I think that's awesome. That's an incredible part of the game. And there were some legitimate, those are real traditions. That's the real way Ohio State runs out on the field. That's the real way Kentucky runs out on the field every game. It was really cool.
Yeah, I'm excited to get more into it. Some of those smaller details like that, I didn't notice. I had my son sitting in here with me, so we were just having fun playing it. As far as all that stuff for smaller schools, obviously the Power 5 schools are going to get a lot more shine, a lot more attention. I'm hoping that's the case with schools like Memphis, UAB, everybody in the American, and so on, MAC, all that. But so far, I haven't had enough time to get into it and really get figure out what is and what isn't in the game. I got to say,
away from that time doing this podcast, so let's get going.
It's just so nice playing and hearing a school fight song again. I'm just saying, just got to throw that out there.
Oh, I know. I know, it's incredible.
I was smiling the whole time. Anyway, the reason we are here today, as the title says, is for our BDT Preseason All-American teams. And let's hop straight
Yes.
into it. We do it a little differently than everybody. We start off with our Power 5 Preseason All-Americans.
Which I am still calling Power 5 because I made sure that if I had any Oregon State or Washington State players that I wanted to make this list, they would have made this list and not the Group of 5 list. As you can see from this list, though, no Oregon State or Washington State players made it. So the distinction was useless. And sorry to those schools, is what it is. Starting off with a banger, couple of Georgia guys. So we're already drunk and disorderly, a little bit of rough on the road. And then you have Ollie Gordon. So again, a little bit rough on the road. But we're assuming these guys are on a football field, and they're really good at that. So we're going to leave them there. Talk about them as football players. One thing that you will notice, I don't have any Ohio State players on this offense, which is unusual for the Buckeyes the past several years. They've always had at least one player on the offensive All-American team. And there is a contender at left guard. I went for the Tyler Booker, Tate Ratledge combination at guard instead. Also, running backs, I don't know who's really going to get the bulk of the carries between Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Either one of them individually are serious contenders for this list, but put them in the group, put them in the room together. Their stats aren't going to scream All-American at you the way Ollie Gordon's will and Omarion Hampton's will and have so far through their careers.
Yeah, I just to run through the offensive side of the ball before we get too much further into this. We'll go down here by position. Carson Beck, quarterback out of Georgia. I'll come back to him in particular. Ollie Gordon, the second out of Oklahoma State at running back, followed by Omarion Hampton out of North Carolina, also at running back. At wide receiver, we have Luther Burden, the third from Mizzou, and Tatoria McMullen out of Arizona. How about I fuck it up?
That's fine. It's close enough.
We then have Colston Loveland out of Michigan at tight end. So, Doug probably died on the inside when he did that. Will Campbell at offensive tackle from LSU, and Kelvin Banks Jr. from Texas on the other side at tackle. Already mentioned Tyler Booker and Tate Rutledge from Alabama and Georgia, respectfully, at the guard positions, and then Parker Brailsford, Alabama, at center. Going back to Carson Beck real quick, it's insane to me that Georgia continues to have a top tier, at least at the college level, quarterback year in and year out. How are they doing this?
Carson Beck's different. I don't think Stetson Bennett or,
Jake Fromm.
I was thinking of before Jake Fromm. They've had several guys in a row where it's like, yeah, they're decent collegiate quarterbacks, not really guys you expect to make a difference at the next level. Carson Beck makes the All-American team here because this is probably your number one overall pick next year's NFL draft. Carson Beck is legitimately a great quarterback, the likes of which Georgia has not had since Matthew Stafford. That level of quarterback play back there on the University of Georgia team with Kirby Smart is terrifying. There's a reason they're the number one team in the country going into the season. Carson Beck plus this defense, that's insane. Now, they do sacrifice having the experience at running back that they normally do. They've had a great run of recruiting and developing their own running backs. A couple of transfers now. It's going to be a little bit more of the Carson Beck show than what we're used to out of Georgia. Usually more of a pro-style, run-heavy offense. But, hey, a Georgia who can sling the ball and stop you from slinging it, it's going to be a good team.
Absolutely. And I'm drawn to Luther Burden III as well on the offensive side of the ball. We just had a extremely deep wide receiver draft, And looking at the slew of wide receivers, at least at the Power 5 level, if you want to call it that, Luther Burden III is head and shoulders above everybody else in college football right now.
What came down to Missouri or Ohio State out of high school, this was before Ohio State had the insane run of first-round receivers that they've had. He decided to stay in-state with Mizzou. He was a track star in high school, and he shows it on the field. Luther Burden III is insanely fast and a really gifted catcher of the football. Great hands on
Size,
Luther Burden.
hands. Yeah.
It's the complete package.
It's
Luther
not even
Burden
fair.
is definitively the best receiver in college football, at least going into the season. Things could change. Maybe somebody breaks out in a big way. But Luther Burden III is awesome.
Absolutely.
I want to jump down to tight end because you said I have a Michigan player there. Colston Loveland is one of the 6 tight ends last season who had an average yards per route of over 2. That's really rare for a tight end to have yards per route over 2. That means when you do catch the ball, it's pretty deep. Colston Loveland only had like 500 some yards. Every time he caught the ball, it was a first down, and it was usually like 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12. It was crazy how useful Loveland was. Of the other 5 that were in that category, they all got drafted in the first 4 rounds last year. So Colston Loveland is the only one returning with that kind of receiving chops, and expect him to be the favorite target of whoever ends up playing quarterback for Michigan this year. They have a couple of options, and neither one of them have played much at the collegiate level so far. So Colston Loveland, that safety valve, not only that, kind of their mid-range receiving threat at the team up north. And then an all SEC offensive line.
Not too surprising, although it is still weird seeing Texas in the SEC.
I could have gone for the other LSU tackle. I went for Kelvin Banks instead. Will Campbell, I think, is better than his counterpart on the other side of that LSU offensive line. I will say second place for center is the Alabama transfer to Ohio State. Connor Hensman. Not Connor Hensman. He's the backup center for Ohio State now. Seth McLaughlin. And then my third place guard here was Donovan Jackson of Ohio State. So again, Ohio State getting shut out on the offensive side of the ball in favor of the Alabama guys who stayed at Alabama.
But it's got to feel pretty good as we move over to the defensive side of the ball. Should be no surprise here. We see a lot more Big Ten presence starting right off on the defensive line with Mason Graham out of Michigan, Tyleek Williams out of Ohio State. And then we go back to the SEC for a little bit. James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee, Ashton Gelati. That's what I'm going with, out of Louisville.
Sure.
Sawyer, Jack Sawyer out of Ohio State. Those 3 men play the edge position. Then moving to linebacker, we're going to get some more Big Ten here with Iowa and Jay Higgins. Then going to LSU for Harold Perkins Jr. Then to the cornerback position, Will Johnson out of Michigan and Denzel Burke out of Ohio State. Malachi Starks out of Georgia and Caleb Downs out of Ohio State, holding down the safety positions.
So as much talent as Michigan lost from that national championship team, they returned their 2 best players in Mason Graham and Will Johnson. Will Johnson is the best corner in the country. I don't care that Travis Hunter exists. Will Johnson is much better. And you'll notice I don't have Travis Hunter on this team anyway. I went with Denzel Burks as that second corner, kind of for 2 reasons. Number one, he's had 2 phenomenal seasons at Ohio State, and he's been showing he's kind of figuring out the other styles of coverage required at Ohio State now. where it used to be a lot more straight up man coverage. And Denzel Burke has a lot more versatility to his game recently as a result of the Jim Knowles scheme. If you remember back when Ohio State had that run of first round corners like Jeff Okudah, Marshawn Lattimore, they're all very man to man style corners. There was a string of defensive backs that were all really like press man guys. Denzel Burke can kind of do everything now, and I think he's going to take even another step beyond what was already probably a second team All-American season last year. And then, yeah, Will Johnson's the best corner in the country. I don't think there's going to be any contention with Mason Graham either, being the number one defensive tackle in this class this year. Now, Tyleik Williams is kind of a toss-up. You could have gone with him or Howard Cross out of Notre Dame. I went for Tyleik Williams in part because of the storyline, I'll be honest with you, where he was kind of the second, along with Jack Sawyer, of the class of Ohio State juniors, redshirt juniors, who came back instead of going to the NFL draft. Tyleik Williams, again, along with Denzel Burke, was probably like a second team All-American type player last year. His presence on that interior of the defensive line will be invaluable this season, and he will be relied on very heavily on that Ohio State front, not only as a run stopper and a block eater, which he can do. He has some legitimate pass rushing ability up the middle. Mason Graham does too. I'm not trying to say he's as good as Mason Graham. Mason Graham is a different level here. Between Howard Cross and Tyleik Williams, I went with Tyleik Williams here. And then, speaking of the edge rusher position with Jack Sawyer, kind of between him and JT Tuimoloau for an Ohio State guy. I did go with 3 edge rushers here, though, because outside those two, I think it's undisputed. I don't know anyone who's arguing James Pierce and Ashton Gillette are the best edge rushers in college football.
Gelati.
Yeah. Gillette, Ashton Gillette razors. I know you hate Tennessee. James Pierce Jr. is, alongside Carson Beck, a contender to go number 1 overall in the 2025 NFL draft. Phenomenal edge rusher. And for Louisville, having a solid defensive end is something that they've kind of figured out how to do every 10 to 20 years. And when they do, it's really exciting. They hit on some massive ones. Elvis Dumerville, maybe being the most recent like massive edge rusher out of Louisville. But only 2 ACC players make this entire list.
Yeah, it was.
And defense.
Well, and I'm trying to remember what conference Arizona's in right now, too.
The Big 12.
Big 12. Yeah, so we've only got, 2 Big 12 players on this entire list as well.
Yeah.
And no.
So you get down to special teams. I have two ACC special teamers.
That is true. So let's go straight to that right now. We got a long snapper, Julian Ashby out of Vanderbilt. Andres Borregales.
My favorite long snapper in all of college football. He played at Furman, and he was on our FCS All-Americans last year.
I remember that.
And transferred to Vanderbilt, which I got to say, if you're going to transfer to the SEC as a long snapper, what better place to showcase your talents than Vanderbilt?
We then have Andres Borregales out of Miami at kicker. Zachariah Brown from USC as our returner. And Zachariah Branch, sorry. And Alex Mastromano out of Florida State for punters.
Yeah, Zachariah Branch is one of those kind of guys where he's a fringe All-American as a kind of that flex receiver. Maybe you find a way to get him the ball when you're on offense. You figure it out. But also, he's probably the most reliable returner in college football. So easy to find a place for him on this list then. Just slot him in there and let the coaches figure it out. If they want to use him on offense too, why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we don't have a second team All-Americans here at BDT.
Right. We don't believe in that shit.
We have a group of 5 All-Americans team, and if you've been here long enough, you can probably guess what the third one is, but we'll get there in due time. So let's start off on the offensive side of the ball. At quarterback, Caden Salter out of Liberty, followed by our 2 running backs, Ashton Genty out of Boise State and Quentin Cooley, also out of Liberty. Then at wide receiver, we have Ricky White III out of UNLV and Torrey Horton out of Colorado State. Tight end, we have Harold Fannin Jr. from Bowling Green. And then the big dudes in the trenches on the offensive line, we have Chase Lunt out of UConn at tackle. His counterpart on the other side of the line, Braylon Nelson out of Fresno State. Then up the middle, we have Clay Webb at Jacksonville State. Jacob Bayer from Arkansas State at center. And at the other guard position, we have Daniel King out of Troy.
Caden Salter flirted with the transfer portal, ended up coming back to Liberty for his final season of college football. Very glad that he did. And he's also a big reason why he's seemingly everyone's favorite to win the group of 5 spot in the college football playoff. If you talk to the vast majority of publications, Caden Salter is exactly what you're looking for in a group of 5 quarterback. Nullifies your smaller offensive line when you're playing big opponents because he can scramble like nobody's business. He can run for it too. He might be one of those 2,000-yard passer, 1,200-yard rusher kind of quarterbacks, and he does it very well. Ashton Genty had a chance to be the overall FBS All-American, not just a group of 5 All-American there. Same with Clay Webb on the offensive line. Phenomenal players down here in the group of 5. Don't sleep on these guys. You may remember Torrey Horton from this list last season as well. He is still kicking it out there. And Harold Fannin Jr. is one of the best combinations of receiving and blocking that I've been able to put on the tight end spot for an All-American team. I'm very excited for Harold Fannin Jr.
Yeah, and it's an extremely talented group of players out here. Where we said there was a lack of depth at wide receiver at the Power 5 level, the Group of 5 level has a lot more depth. We talked privately in our private Discord channel there. You had mentioned Rock Taylor out of Memphis potentially sneaking into this wide receiver group here, but I see why he's not here. And we mentioned before, as I mentioned privately as well, Seth Hennigan does a great job of spreading the ball out. Rock Taylor is always the primary target, but there are games where Demir Blankenship ends up being the guy, or Kobe Drake ends up being the guy. I mean, he's really good at spreading the ball out, and that honestly hurts his wide receivers a little bit, but I think makes the team a little bit better. So while there's no Memphis players on the offensive side of the ball here, I still think they'll be just fine. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the show.
And don't sleep on Ricky White III. He's like potential to be a top 5 receiver in all of FBS football.
Absolutely. But that's all we got for the offensive side of the ball. Let's move on to the defensive side of the ball. On the interior defensive line, we have Wykevius Thomas from Southern Alabama, USA. We have Darius Alexander out of Toledo, and then we only have 2 edge rushers this time. Ahmed Hassan out of Boise State and Eric O'Neill out of James Madison. How bad did I mess up his last name?
Yeah, you did. It's fine. Okay. Only 2 edge rushers. I essentially put a flex position on the defense for myself. So I used it on a linebacker here instead of an edge rusher as I did for Power 5.
And we have...
well, before you get there, you may remember Eric O'Neill from our FCS All-Americans last year for the Long Island Sharks. Eric O'Neill makes the jump to the FBS for a very exciting James Madison team, now head coached by Bob Chesney of Holy Cross last year. That team is going to be very different than it was last season and also potentially very fun.
They actually going to be bowl eligible this year? Because that would be fantastic.
Yes.
They got fucked last year.
Yes, they will. As of the 1st
Beautiful.
of July, they are officially full-fledged members of the FBS.
Love to see it. Moving on to our linebackers, we have Jason Henderson of Old Dominion, Matt Solopek out of Miami of Ohio, Chandler Martin from Memphis, Siobhan Ravel out of East Carolina at cornerback, Dante Balfour from Charlotte, also at cornerback, Jack Howell at safety from Colorado State, and his counterpart at safety, Jalen Cantillon from UNLV.
Yeah, Jason Henderson has been a Group of 5 All-American for us in the past as well. I'm amazed that he stayed at Old Dominion. I really thought he would have moved on to a power program, but he wanted to stick with the Monarchs. Got to respect it. Yeah, he will finish his career as the single greatest defender in Old Dominion football history. Unfortunately for Old Dominion, it's not a very long list. But Jason Anderson is incredible. Matt Salopek has been one of the defensive guys I've loved to watch in the MAC past couple of years. Leads this Miami defense once again. And how do you like your guy Chandler Martin making the list here?
Yeah, he's not a guy that's going to miss tackles, which is exactly what you want at that linebacker position. He's a redshirt junior this year. I would be stunned if he's still here next year if he puts up even close to the performance he put up last year. He's a true leader on the defensive side of the ball. He's the heart and soul of defense. Chandler Martin absolutely deserves to make this list, and I believe he made Phil Steele's list as well. So we're not completely out
Somewhere.
to lunch here.
He doesn't he doesn't separate Power 5.
Yeah, he has fourth team preseason All-American and first team preseason All-AAC.
Nice.
So we know a little bit what we're talking about here.
Jack Howell made our list last year as well. Colorado State getting 2 representatives 2 years in a row. Torrey Horton and Jack Howell are both awesome. Jalen Cantillon, though, one of those breakout players for UNLV last year that just made them way better than they were supposed to be in Barry Odom's first year at UNLV last year. Hopefully they can continue that momentum and finish the season this time. They didn't do a good job of finishing last year.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But now, your favorite part, special teams. Long snapper.
Just a long snapper.
Yeah, really, the long snapper is your only favorite position. Brody Butler out of MTSU, Middle Tennessee State, for the uninitiated. Go ahead. Pine poetically about him.
No, I'm just a big fan of action of Julian Ashby more than anything. Brody Butler's fine.
And then this has got to grind Tug's gears a little bit. We got the kicker out of Wyoming, John Hoyland.
Which I do feel like I have to throw in here. It very well may be a result of the elevation. Wyoming has the highest elevation stadium in all of FBS football. However, you look at his stats, he's like, I think he was 13 of 22 on field goals last year. Does not scream All-American. And then you look at the field goals that he missed, they were 55 plus because they trust this guy to potentially make those kicks. And if they were any closer than that, they were just going to say, screw it and just let's go for it because we don't usually get this close to the end zone. So John Hoyland's kicks were all from like 40 plus yards, and he made over half of them, which is insane.
So they're trying to kick him till his leg fell off. Got it.
Basically.
Jacob DeJesus out of UNLV. He's the returner making our list here. And then James Ferguson Reynolds. James Ferguson Reynolds from Boise State is your All-American Group of 5 punter.
Yeah, which I had to shrink his name because he hyphenated.
I see that. I see that. Yeah. Boise State's got a decent showing here. This is a pretty wide spread. We only got a couple repeat teams. I think UNLV surprisingly is on here the most, tied with Boise State, I suppose. But man, it's a lot more parity when you get down to the Group of 5 level, if I do say so.
Yeah, definitely. Compared to the Alabama and Georgia representation on the Power 5, we're looking at, there's 2 Liberty guys and everybody's saying that they're the definitive favorite of the Group of 5, and only 2 of them made our Group of 5 All-American team. So there's a lot of room for interpretation down here, which is part of what makes it so fun.
Absolutely. Moving right along to our FCS All-Americans. Should be no surprise who our quarterback is. Mark Gronowski out of South Dakota State.
Yeah.
Then at running back, we have Lan Larison out of UC Davis and MJ Flowers out of Eastern Illinois. At wide receiver, we have Junior Bergen from Montana and Bull Belquist from North Dakota. Carter Runyon out of Towson at tight end. And then on the offensive line, Marcus Ware out of Montana State and Peyton Collins out of Eastern Kentucky at the tackle positions. Gus Miller from SDSU and Jackson Slater from Sacramento State at guard, and Zach Geig out of SEMO.
So I cheated here a little bit. Gus Miller is also a center. I did that because I love both Gus Miller and Zach Geig too much to leave either of them out. And I'll be honest with you, outside of Jackson Slater, not like there. I feel like there's a little bit of a drop off of guard, so I was okay with doing this. Gus Miller is the reigning, defending Lombardi Award winner,
Undisputed.
best center in the nation, and Zach Geig won it the year before. So they're both still here, and they're both still very good and the definite anchors and leaders of these offensive lines. And Gus Miller also coming off of a national championship, and I couldn't take away his All-American status. Felt too cruel. I
right.
got to give credit to Tug. He's the one who turned me on to MJ Flowers out of random chance when he found out that MJ Flowers looked good because he picked Eastern Illinois game one week. I was like, dang, this guy's actually incredible.
And that's why we pick random games.
I do think we are one of the only publications to have MJ Flowers this highly rated out of all the FCS running backs. But damn it, if you watch him play, you'd understand. He is awesome to watch. Junior Bergen is
for a really shitty team.
Right. I think Junior Bergen is the definitive number one receiver in the FCS. Bo Belquist, kind of a toss-up at receiver. There were several options who I could have put number 2, but I at least wanted to get somebody from the Hawks of North Dakota, and Bo Belquist, was in the mix. I threw him in there. Carter Runyon, another one of those tight ends where you look at his stat line, it's really not that impressive. Maybe like a 350-yard receiving year last year for Carter Runyon. If I think that's pretty close, at least. Either way, you kind of have to take into account where those yards are coming from, where Towson was at on the field when they called his number. He is exactly the kind of player you want at the tight end position, can bail you out of any situation, and can be your check down option if you need him to be. Finds a way to get open and will fight for extra yardage like nobody's business. In a world without that Sacramento State tight end, Marshall Martin, Carter Runyon is just fine for the All-American squad. Actually going back to the offensive line here, Peyton Collins is 6'8".
Jesus Christ.
So I had to include him. But Marcus Ware is he's probably, him and Gus Miller make up the 2 best offensive linemen in the FCS. So
I just can't wait for Marcus Ware to have a good career and people start spelling my last name that way because it somehow sounds similar enough. Anyway, if you thought we had a lot of Missouri Valley Football Conference on the offensive side of the ball, buckle up. You're going to really hate this part. Eli Mostert from North Dakota State at the interior defensive line, joined up by Marlon Taylor out of Chattanooga. Moving to the edge position, we have David Walker from Central Arkansas and Amir Abdullah out of Illinois State. Moving on to the linebackers, where we have 3 again this time. Adam Bach out of South Dakota State, James Conway out of Fordham, and Logan Kopp out of North Dakota State. Going to the cornerback position, we head back to South Dakota State for Dallas Beanham, Caleb Lyons out of Eastern Illinois, and we're not done with the Dakotas. From North Dakota State, we have Cole Wisniewski at safety and Kenny Gallup Jr. from Howard.
Yeah,
good luck scoring against the Missouri Valley Football Conference.
A lot of blank Dakota State University defensive players on this list for sure. I do believe it's warranted. You're gonna see in the FCS this year, very similar to last year. It's gonna be South Dakota State, North Dakota State, Montana State are probably your 4 best teams. Outside of them, who knows who's making the playoff? There's actually a kind of a decent spread of pretty talented squads out there now, and the CAA is wide open. It's kind of insane. Now, David Walker, you may remember from this list last year. Same with Marlon Taylor, actually. But David Walker, best part about David Walker is when I went to the Austin Peay game last year against Central Arkansas. Sat in front of the guy who's like, "Hey, ref, number 8's offsides. Number 8's offsides again." That was David Walker.
David Walker.
Looked like he was lined up offsides every play, but that's the kind of inch that makes a difference between an All-American and just a good player. He will line up exactly on the line and will get there faster than anybody else on the edge. David Walker is a great edge rusher for the Bears of Central Arkansas.
Oh, yeah.
That leaves us. I think is like it feels cheesy to say. It's a cliche to say. Adam Bach's the quarterback of that defense.
Yeah.
It's very true, and it's very apparent when you watch that Jackrabbits defense play. He's phenomenal. And I think Caleb Lyons would be starting on an FBS squad this year if he transferred up. But sticking with Eastern Illinois,
that's a move
Eastern
for
Illinois
sure.
made 2 appearances on our All-America squad.
That's
think about
impressive.
that.
That's impressive. And it feels wrong. But if you don't like the Missouri Valley Football Conference, I'm sorry. However, you'll be happy to know we don't have a single MVFC player from the special teams represented here. Just for Tug, we got the long snapper out of Rhode Island, Donato Crisanti. There we go. I got it. I got it on the second try. What a name. Kicker, yep. Ian Williams from Furman. And then Junior Bergen, from Montana, making it again as the returner. If you've watched this man play football, you'll understand.
I couldn't justify putting anyone else there.
No.
I know I listed him twice. I had to.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Hayden Laros from UT Martin at the punter position rounds out our FCS All-Americans and the last All-American from our All-Americans list.
It is kind of brutal to have your only All-American be your punter.
Meh.
I'm sorry, UT Martin.
I'm not.
Of course you're not.
Why would I be?
Oh, man.
But that is not all. We're not just going to talk All-Americans. We're also going to talk about our FBS college football playoff predictions. This is the first time we're going to have 12 teams. I'm expecting some crazy shit to happen. Doug took it very seriously, and John's not here to defend himself. He probably fucked around a little bit too. Here's the fun thing.
Sure did.
We all have an equal amount of opportunity to be right with this.
And very wrong. We will all
and very wrong at the same time. So without further ado, I will kick us off with my bracket here. It's a little bit of a cum fiesta here if you are a Memphis Tigers fan. I have the Tigers winning the national championship. Now, how are they going to do that? They're going to be ranked number 5, taking on Tennessee at number 12, where, of course, they will win. But let's go to the rest of the bracket here. We're not just going to follow Memphis' path straight through.
Which, would that be the first time Tennessee's played at the Liberty Bowl?
since 96 or something like that. It's since
Okay.
Peyton Manning lost to the Tigers. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
They haven't come back in a very long time.
Because that would be a home game for Memphis in the
Yes,
first
it
round of
would.
the playoff.
Yes, it would. Another home game in the first round of the playoffs would be Michigan at number 8 hosting number 9 Texas, and I have them beating the Longhorns going on to face number 1.
I do think you are already wrong here because those two teams at 8 and 9 there play in week 2. And the committee has basically already said they're going to look to avoid rematches, at least in the first round. So,
yeah, if I'm going to flip any of them, it would be flipping Oregon to 9. But we also know that Texas and Oklahoma are going to play, and I have Oklahoma at 7 and Oregon at 10.
Oregon's in the Big Ten. So you're putting 3 Big Ten teams in the top bracket. Maybe flip Texas and Georgia.
We'll get there. For our audio listeners. We'll get there. I have number 7 versus number 10, Oklahoma hosting the Oregon Ducks, and I have them winning and advancing to take on number 2. Don't worry. I'll let you know who's at number 2 here in a moment as well. And closing out the first round of the playoffs, number 6, Georgia hosting number 11, UCF. And UCF somehow pulls this one out. Oh, we're talking Cumpalooza, baby. Going back to number 1, it is the Ohio State University. It's a rematch of the game against Michigan. And, of course, Ohio State's going to pull this one out. At number 2, we have Oklahoma State. And Bedlam may have been a dead rivalry, and it may have been the most one-sided rivalry in the history of rivalries. But Oklahoma State's going to take every opportunity they can to close the gap, and they beat Oklahoma in advance to the semifinals. Then we have number 3, Florida State hosting UCF. And if you know anything, you know how this is going to go. UCF wins.
This is one of the most insane brackets I've ever seen. And it hurts, but I also enjoy it.
It's my favorite. And then number 4, Mizzou playing Memphis. And, of course, Memphis is going to win. I already told you they were a national champion. So that leaves our semifinal matchups of the Ohio State University against the team that they will lose to, the University of Memphis, going up against the other OSU, Oklahoma State University, and the UCF Golden Knights. And because I need to have a Cumpalooza, UCF Golden Knights versus the University of Memphis for the national championship. And just to give you a live look at what every Memphis fan will look like if this happens, we have Randy Marsh for your enjoyment.
That is deeply disturbing. So there is what you're suggesting here is our top 4 conference champions are Ohio State out of the Big Ten, Oklahoma State out of the Big 12, Florida State out of the ACC, and Mizzou pulls off an incredible season winning the SEC.
Which I will say, legitimately, the only one that's far-fetched about that is Mizzou.
I would wager Oklahoma State and Mizzou are equally like a couple teams back on the list.
Is Oklahoma State that far back in the Big 12, though?
Maybe you're right. Maybe they're like
that's what I'm saying. I legitimately, I did start doing this, and I was like, oh, let me try and be a little serious. Let me try to make this make sense. But I got to a point where I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Let's just have fun with it. I do legitimately think that Oklahoma State probably has the best chance out of the Big 12 to make it. Florida State, I think, is the odds-on favorite for the ACC, so that's not a very exciting or sexy pick there. Mizzou, I think
Clemson actually is.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay. So Florida State or Clemson. I had Clemson in here for a little bit, and I was like, wait a minute, I could put UCF in here. Why not? I avoided putting Florida and having an all-Florida bracket or Miami because, 1, I don't trust Miami. And 2, if Florida is even bowl eligible this year, that'll be a W for them. So, the playoffs aren't even on their radar, I wouldn't think.
Right.
The craziest thing about this is having Georgia all the way at 6. Forget Memphis winning. The craziest thing about just the initial bracket is Georgia all the way at 6.
I don't think that's that crazy because all it takes is one upset in the SEC championship game for Georgia to not be in the top 4.
That's fair.
Right. So that's possible. What is amazing to me is the fact that you have 5 SEC teams in this playoff.
Well, I know how ESPN thinks.
Yeah, but the fact that you have Oklahoma making it, first of all, holy smokes. That's a 7-win team if they're lucky.
I just want to see as many fun matchups as possible, if I'm being real with you.
I don't know why I'm even debating this. This obviously isn't going to happen. All right. I don't think mine's going to happen either, but at least it's interesting, and there are a couple of good points to talk about. So one of the things that the committee is, again, they've basically come out and said they're going to try to avoid rematches, at least in the first round from the regular season. But also, it's hard to imagine they don't take some storylines into consideration for this, simply because it's people. It's like 12 people in a room making this decision, and they're going to want the most TV money possible. So if we can create some narratives, that creates the sides of the brackets. Once you have like the top 4 in place, you kind of create the matchups based on the storyline, is how I went about creating this scenario. So in this bracket scenario, Ohio State's your 1 seed, undefeated Big Ten champion. Georgia is your 2 seed. I think they lose 1 game somewhere. And because they're a 1-loss SEC champion, they get the number 2 seed as opposed to undefeated Ohio State. Now, if you look at their schedule, it's not that crazy to say they might lose 1 game somewhere, either to Alabama, Ole Miss, Texas. They have a very difficult schedule. One team they don't play is LSU, who I also have making this playoff. We'll get to that later. So Georgia with 1 loss would be your 2 seed. 3 seed, Big 12 champion, maybe even undefeated Big 12 champion, falls behind the 1-loss SEC champion. I have Utah being the 3 seed here. This is a little bit contingent on Utah being healthy all season, which hasn't been the case for the last 2 years. If it does happen, I think they're far and away the favorite for the Big 12. 4 seed is where it will be a good conversation, because the way the playoff committee rules are written, the top 4 conference champions get a bye. I'm going to say that with no clear, great teams out of the ACC, and with the way the schedules line up, I have Memphis beating Florida State in the regular season, going undefeated. Florida State loses maybe 1 other game in there as well as a 2-loss ACC champion. Memphis is ranked like 1 spot above Florida State in the final rankings. That elevates them all the way to number 4 in the playoff bracket, even if they're like number 10 or so in the final college football playoff rankings, because they're a higher rated champion than the team that they beat, Florida State. They get to be the 4 seed, which would be very fun and very chaotic. And I think the playoff committee would change some rules if this happened, which I want to see them do, because it gives us more reason to just go ahead and break away the Big Ten, SEC, abolish them.
And shit on them for being fucking cowards and changing the rules
Yes.
when it went exactly how they wrote it.
So let's go matchup by matchup then. On the Ohio State side of the bracket, I have 8 and 9 seed Alabama against Oklahoma State. I do have Oklahoma State making the playoff here. Alabama against Oklahoma State is an interesting matchup, simply because you have the longest tenured coach in this playoff bracket against the shortest tenured coach in this playoff bracket. Very new school versus old school kind of team building here. I think that'd be fun. Also, you have the storyline of either both the OSUs playing each other for the first time in a very long time, or you have Ohio State, Alabama, which will be the biggest draw, the second round no matter who else is in the second round. Or if you have Ohio State and Alabama playing, that would be quite the TV draw, which is what I have happening in Ohio State winning that game. Then at the 2 seed side of the bracket, Georgia gets to face the winner of LSU Notre Dame. Notre Dame is ineligible to be one of the top 4 seeds anyway because they are not eligible for a conference championship. But I have them falling to the 10 seed here and playing LSU for the Brian Kelly storyline, of course. And then you have either a Notre Dame Georgia game, which is going to be massive by itself, both very big fan bases, or you have LSU Georgia, who is the one top 10 team of the SEC that Georgia didn't have to play this year. So to get that rematch, which was a couple of awesome games last season, would be very exciting in the second round of the playoff. But I have Notre Dame beating LSU and then Georgia beating Notre Dame. Utah side of the bracket, Oregon at the 6th seed, Florida State at the 11 seed. Again, slotting behind Memphis in the final rankings, but down the board a little bit. So have Florida State number 11 against the team they played in the 2014 playoff, the first round of the playoff in 2014, Jameis Winston against Marcus Mariota, Oregon, Florida State rematch here in the first round of the first ever 12-team playoff bracket against Utah. I can't think of a good storyline for Florida State, Utah, but Oregon, Utah, you have kind of a Pac-12 matchup there. So fun to have that back.
RIP.
And then I do have Utah making it out of that side of the bracket eventually and losing to Georgia. And then in the Memphis side of the bracket, I have number 5, Ole Miss, and number 12, Penn State. Penn State is probably the biggest beneficiary of the 12-team expanded playoff of any school in the country. They have been in the top 12 of the final rankings, I think 7 years that we've had the 4-team playoff. They're a great team who just can't get past Ohio State or Michigan or both on any given year. Now without divisions in the Big Ten, and they don't have to play a couple of those schools. They only have Ohio State out of the top tier of the Big Ten. I'm going to say they still lose that game, but they make the playoff anyway, as they would have most every season if we had a 12-team playoff going back in time. So this would be a rematch. Ole Miss Penn State would be a rematch of the Peach Bowl last year, which was an awesome game. And then either way, you're either getting a rivalry of sorts with Memphis and Ole Miss. They both don't really like each other. Not that Ole Miss has like a huge hard-on for hating Memphis, but it's not like they're huge fans of each other, which would just be fun. But then you have Penn State, Memphis, who met in the, what was it, the Cotton Bowl?
Cotton Bowl.
In 2016?
No, it was 2020, right before COVID.
Okay.
A much better time, a calmer time,
Yeah.
a drunken time.
Yeah, so all those 3 schools have some history together, and I think it'd be very interesting. I do have Ole Miss coming out of that side of the bracket, though. Unfortunately, I don't think Memphis can hang with that Lane Kiffin offense. But then you have Ohio State facing 3 straight SEC schools, beating Alabama, beating Ole Miss, and beating Georgia to be undisputed national champions. How else would you want to script it? Go through the meat grinder of an expanded and more powerful Big Ten and then have to face nothing but SEC schools in the playoff. You can't get more definitive of a national champion than that.
And people will still say that Michigan was a better national champion. Don't worry.
I know.
I like this.
So
I do.
Go ahead.
I do legitimately think that yours has a very strong possibility of getting at least half the field right. And I also think that Memphis slotting in at number 4, ending up ahead of FSU is not as far-fetched as what people may think at the onset of this. Their only hiccup potentially, other than FSU out of the conference, is going to be against Boise. That's going to be another huge game that has massive playoff implications for the group of 5 representatives.
You don't play
Some
Boise
people are.
State this year.
Yeah, they do. 100% they play Boise State.
I looked at this not that long ago. 2024 schedule for Memphis. You do not play Boise State this year, man.
Bullshit. No, man.
You play North Alabama, Troy, at Florida State, at Navy, Middle Tennessee, at USF, North Texas, Charlotte, at UTSA, Rice, UAB, at Tulane.
Well, fuck me. I thought they had Boise State again this year. Well, in that case, they just have to not fuck up against UTSA this year. And sounds pretty good. Yeah, this is
And
more
upset Florida
realistic than
State.
I was going to give it credit for. And upset Florida State, which is, if they're going to catch them, it's going to be early in the year.
Yeah, and it's not as weird as it sounds. Even if it it sounds plausible, it's like, well, Florida State has basically a new offense this year. DJ Uyunglele has been a decent collegiate quarterback, but he's not what Jordan Travis was last year before he got hurt.
Mm-mm.
And this defense had a lot of turnover. And I don't know that they'll be ready for a team as sneakily strong as Memphis will be at week 3. They play Georgia Tech week 0, Boston College week 1. I don't know. You have a bye week before Memphis, though, which is tough.
Well, but I will say the one thing that I alluded to a little bit when we were talking Group of 5 All-Americans as well. Caden Salter, the obvious choice after the season he had last year and returning instead of entering the transfer portal. Right there at number 2, Seth Hennigan. Now, this is definitely me giving him some shine because he is the Memphis guy. However, if you watch that, if you watch that North Texas game last year, which I'm probably in the minority on that one because it didn't seem like anybody was at the game either. Seth Hennigan is from Denton, Texas, the home of the North Texas Mean Green.
Mm-hmm.
And the game was not going so hot. Matter of fact, Memphis should have lost that game. Seth Hennigan said, nope, I'm not losing this game at my home away from home. My real home, my birth, whatever, however you want to fucking say it. Anyway, Seth Hennigan decided Memphis was winning that fucking game. And not only did Memphis win that game, they went on to close out the season on an extremely high note, winning they went out on a high note because that it continued on the rest of the season. They go on and win the Liberty Bowl against Iowa State. Just absolutely unbelievable. Oh yeah, I went back too far. Narrowly losing to SMU was their only hiccup on the way to a dominating Liberty Bowl victory. Seth Hennigan was absolutely a game changer. This was a completely different team after that North Texas game than they were before it.
And for people who are just box score readers, you might look at the USF game 59-50, be like, how's that any different? Or the overtime win against Charlotte 44-38. Those games felt different. And I don't know what exactly changed, and I don't know why the defense was struggling so bad in those particular games. But that offense was humming on a different level. The offense was humming on a different level than they were earlier in the year, which, again, reading the stat sheet, you're not going to see too much of a difference. But watching the games, it definitely felt different. I agree with you.
But that's enough of your bracket. That's enough talking about Memphis, although I could go on for a couple more hours if we wanted to. Let's move on to Tug's.
Tug's probably not going to have Memphis.
Tug does not have
Memphis. No, he does not.
The only one of us to not put Memphis in our bracket. He did some wild shit though.
I understand picking Liberty and picking them as a 12 seed is probably the most likely scenario of any Group of 5 school making it in the playoff. They're going to be the 12 seed. And also, Liberty's the odds-on favorite to have that spot at the end of the year right now, just because they play in Conference USA, Conference USA is dog shit outside of Liberty and Jacksonville State. So I don't even think New Mexico State's going to be any good this year. So, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Because Jared Kill's gone and Pavia is at Vanderbilt now.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, Conference USA sucks. And
as they should be. Yeah. Which is almost a little depressing considering it took them so long to get into a conference. Conference USA looked so strong, and then it's just fallen off a cliff as it is often known to do.
Just here's the problem with Conference USA. It's like even the supposedly strong teams of Conference USA, like you think of good Conference USA teams, I think of Western Kentucky being like one of those solid teams. They're going to finish the year like 7-5. It's not like they're actually a scary team.
Yeah.
You're playing at Sam Houston. Yeah, that's real scary.
It's tough. It's a tough place. Probably, one of the top 10 stadiums in the country. What are you talking about?
The hardest game on Liberty's schedule this year is at Appalachian State. And Appalachian State is always like a 6-6 team who is always just hard to play for no good reason. So it's not even like it's that hard of a toughest game to have. They play at UMass. They play Campbell. I mean, it's a Liberty should be in this spot. I understand where he's coming from with that. Other than them, have some problems with this.
Where do you want to start? Okay, let's start there. 8-9. He has Ohio State at the 1 seed, just like you did. 8-9. Alabama, Colorado.
He has 3 Big 12 teams in here as well.
Yes,
which I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen. And even if it does happen, it is not going to be Colorado. Are you kidding me?
Well,
you have 2 players that are good. And then you have the dredges of everybody else's roster who couldn't get a starting job anywhere else.
I'll be right back.
Coached by Deion Sanders, who, as great of a player as he was, he won at the FCS level because of an imbalance of talent. And I'm not the only one to say that. I still 100% believe that to be true. Jackson State was not some incredible coaching job. Jackson State was a result of he had the number 1 player in the entire country come to Jackson State to play for Deion Sanders. Jackson State was the result of he had legitimate Sun Belt talent hopping down to the HBCUs playing in the SWAC. Sure, you can go 12-0 and lose the Celebration Bowl with that kind of a roster. It doesn't work with a power conference team. And we saw that last year when they went 4-8. I mean, I don't see this team being any better than that this season. Maybe they're fighting for bowl eligibility. Maybe.
I don't see college football playoffs. I see a bowl game for them this year, though. I can see a bowl game.
It's very possible they start the year 0-3. They're home for North Dakota State to start the year.
They could start 0-3.
They're at Nebraska, and then they're at Colorado State. I mean, Colorado State gave them fits last year in Boulder.
Yeah. For what it's worth, though, he does have them losing to Alabama, which, of course, makes the most sense of anything on this bracket. Staying on this half of the bracket, we have number 4 Florida State, but who will they face? Will it be number 5 LSU or number 12 Liberty, who we've already talked about a little bit here? Again, it makes sense that Liberty would be his pick. A lot of people are going that direction right now as it is. And we talked already about why people are going that way. So I don't feel like we need to talk about it there. We've talked about LSU a little bit, and Tug's not here to defend his bracket. So I don't think we
LSU,
need to
their
go
thing
with this.
is they have an incredible offensive line and they have a great defense. And outside of that, it's up in the air what you have year to year. But LSU is going to be great if they have a great offensive line and a great defense.
So that matchup will be number 4 Florida against number 5 LSU. But let's slide over to the other side
Florida
here
State.
real quick. Florida State, sorry. Sliding over to the other side. That would be fucking wild. Especially since he has Georgia at number 2.
Right.
Georgia at number 2, and then they will face the winners of the other OSU, Oklahoma State at 7, and Washington at number 10.
Now, we both had Oklahoma State in our brackets. I'm not criticizing that selection.
We all did.
Washington making the playoff this year would be an act of God. And I'm sorry if you're a Huskies fan. I'm telling you the truth. That is not going to happen.
Search your heart. You know it to be true.
They have lost everyone.
So much. Yes.
They're returning 2 starters total. This is not the same team.
Enjoy the tailgating.
Also, you're not playing Pac-12 schedule anymore. You really think Washington's going to match up with Wisconsin this year? I don't think so. I think Rutgers has a shot to be better than Washington this year with what Greg Schiano's doing over there.
That's a hot take.
You watched the Rutgers game last year. Rutgers is actually not that bad.
So what you're saying
Washington might be that bad.
Playoffs.
And Washington is at Rutgers this year. Watch out.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs?
Trying to win a game. Come on, Washington.
Here's my legitimate. I'm going down their schedule. Here's what I think Washington's going to do. Weber State, that's a win. Eastern Michigan, that's a win. Washington State, sorry, Cougars fans, that's a win for Washington. Home for Northwestern. Let's say you start the year 4-0. That's a great start to the year. You lose at Rutgers. Then you lose at home to the Michigan Wolverines. Then you lose at Iowa. Yeah, you can beat Indiana. You're 5-3. Do they?
You're already
USC
not making the playoffs, though.
Do you beat USC this year? Who cares? You're losing next week to Penn State. Do you beat UCLA this year? Maybe. Who cares? You're losing to Oregon. Oregon's coming for that ass this year. So you've already lost 5 games, and that's without counting the toss-ups.
But he does redeem himself. He has Oklahoma State winning to face Georgia in the next round. And then rounding out his bracket, he has number 3 Utah, and they will face the winner of number 6 Oregon or number 11 Clemson.
Yeah. I don't hate this side of the bracket. 2/3 of it was copied from my bracket, so that's fine. And then so Florida State 11 is Clemson at 11. So perfectly fine. I think
which is crazy Clemson because as Tug has stated on this show, Dabo Swinney is not a good coach.
I know, and he's the only one of us that has Clemson in the playoff this year.
I know. I'll be honest. I had Clemson in there, and then Doug looked at what I was doing and called me out, and I was like, "Fuck it, come Palooza, here we go." UFC or UCF.
Yeah,
I did have Clemson in there initially.
I told you Florida instead of Georgia too. You wouldn't do it.
I wouldn't do that. I'm not that crazy. I do like the Clemson pick here. I think that's probably realistic for them at number 11.
And I think totally see. I can totally see Oregon getting past Utah as well, which is what he has
Yes.
here.
Yes. So
No problem with
moving on just a little bit. We have Oregon beating Clemson and then beating Utah, the number 3 seed. Georgia beating Oklahoma State, Ohio State beating Alabama, and FSU beating LSU, giving us Ohio State versus FSU and Georgia versus Oregon. He went for the first 4-team playoff championship rematch in the first 12-team playoff championship, Florida State at Oregon. And I want to sit here and laugh at it, and I know that's exactly why he did it. I don't know that this is that far-fetched.
Slightly incorrect. Florida State, Oregon was the semifinal.
It was
in
a
2014.
semifinal. Gotcha. Either
Ohio
way.
State, Oregon was the national championship. I just say it would be highly irregular for college football if both semifinals were upset. If you had both lower seeds winning the semifinals, I don't think that's going to happen. It would be more likely for both higher seeds to blow the lower seeds out the water based on past years of college football experience with playoffs. It'd be more likely for number 1 and number 2 to win by 50 than for both number 3 and number 4 to win those games.
But I wonder how much we're going to see blowouts this time around, like this year. Because we didn't the past 2 years, Georgia against TCU. Throw that one out. That game happening was a fluke to begin with. I feel like this last season, unless I'm having some type of fever dream, and I granted didn't pay as much attention as I wanted to because, well, the committee pissed me off. I don't feel like any of those games were that out of hand.
I'd say the national championship was actually kind of out of hand. 34-13 is not exactly a close game.
Right.
You may be referring to Michigan, Alabama going to overtime.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
Yep.
and Texas and Washington went down to the wire as well.
Washington was a great game. The year prior to that, though, we're looking at TCU upsetting Michigan in a shootout 6-point game. Georgia
And getting their fucking doors blown off against Georgia.
Georgia waltzed that whole playoff.
They had because they took out Marvin Harrison Jr. in the first half.
Yeah. The second half of that game was not as competitive because of that. I don't know. That Ohio State Georgia game was pretty good. That's all right. That's fair. They can be close. It's not. I still contend it is more historically probable, more probable based on historical data that your higher seeds will blow out your lower seeds than both of them to be upsets.
I am also curious to see what the parity across a 12-team playoff is going to look like because, like we said, it's been almost an inevitability that we're going to have at least one blowout, if not multiples, with the 4-team playoff. And I expect it to kind of mirror just what we've seen in bowl season. Probably the only difference is it's going to matter a little bit more. You're not going to have players dropping out like they had been because they're going to have something to play for, right? The Cotton Bowl is going to mean something versus just a Cotton Bowl championship. It's going to be to continue on at an opportunity to win a national championship.
Here's another thing I'm very interested in seeing this year is whether the first round bye helps or hurts the team who gets the bye, because there can be quite a long break in between the last game, the championship game that you played, and then playing that playoff game. It might be too long. We saw that seriously affect Ohio State in the late 2000s, where you
Yes.
had Terrell Pryor on the awards ceremony circuit for a month before they would play in the national championship game. Now, I know it's not exactly that length of time anymore, but if you give college kids a nice long winter break in between playing football games, they might not be as ready to go as the teams who had
You
to
want
keep
them to be.
preparing, keep practicing. So it's possible we see some upsets in that second round, and people are like, look at that. Here's evidence that the 12-team playoff was justified. I don't know. Uh, there are so many human factors to consider there. That might be a data point worth keeping track of going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited for it. I hope if you're a college football fan that you're excited for the 12-team playoff as well, because shit, we've been asking for the shit to be figured out and done correctly for forever.
It's still not,
Maybe
but it's closer.
it's a lot closer, and maybe we will see though after a couple of years, like, hey, yeah, we do need to break down the top division of college football one more level. Maybe we'll see a lot of changes in the sense of how conferences are structured. Maybe I don't. When you enter that Division One, specifically talking college football, when you enter that Division One FBS level, I don't understand why we can't figure something out to where there is some type of promotion and relegation system. Because in a lot of ways, the academic piece of what conferences are has largely gone out the window and gone more towards, hey, we're going to chase the money that this big conference TV deal is going to offer us. There is some integrity there still, sure. And I think as far as that goes, those big name conferences, hey, you know what? College football, that's going to be its own thing. Baseball,
Right.
basketball, whatever. We're going to have those solid conferences and it's going to be set. Football is going to be a wild card. We're going to bounce you around. We're going to move you around based on how good your team has been doing, has been performing, and we expect them to rise, fall, whatever. If you don't meet that mark, congratulations, you're going to a different conference.
I say we follow the Chip Kelly model proposed a couple years ago anyway, and just football be its own separate thing entirely.
Yes,
Stop
and
acting like football and softball need to be in the same conference together.
yeah, and I think
Why does your women's rowing team need to be competing in the Big Ten if you're UCLA? Like,
do they even have
come
rowing
on.
in the Big Ten? Yeah, it's
Yeah,
they do.
you got Maryland and Rutgers, baby.
Oh, so all the way across the fucking country. That makes sense.
Ohio State has teams. Anyway,
Seeing two of the service academies be football only members for the American Athletic Conference, it makes way too much fucking sense. And I understand the TV money that's involved. I understand that like the Big Ten network, the SEC network, they don't just play football games on there. So I understand the allure to it. What should have happened was they should have held these conferences' feet to the fire and said, hey, our football team is leaving, and if you don't figure the rest of this out, we're going to find another place for all of our other sports to play. And that is what should have happened. I understand very clearly why Chip Kelly and some of these other coaches and athletic directors started coming up and saying, hey, this is not the best idea. We're not looking out for the student athlete. And I really do think I believe you shared the article in our Discord about the contract that EA has for their college football game. The wording is not with the NCAA; it is with the NCAA or any future organization. The writing's on the wall. We can all see it. We're all smart enough to realize it's coming. Is the NCAA smart enough to figure something out to try and preserve what they still have right now?
and here's the thing: the NCAA can still totally exist. Just get out of football. Football is a separate entity at this point. There's so much money in football, not as much money in everything else. So,
and I'll say too, I think if you are the NCAA, the only thing that still captures, actually, there's not a lot that captures the spirit of what you want intercollegiate athletics to be at the FBS level. You're there because you like the money. The FCS is 100% what college football has been their vision from the start, from the founding of the NCAA. That still exists at the FCS level, Division II, Division III. FBS college football, as much as I love the spring leagues, they're not necessary because we have FBS college football.
Exactly. And that's why the NFL has never really launched their own G League or whatever the NBA has. The NBA screwed themselves over with that by making it the rule where you don't have to stay in college for more than a single season.
Yep.
NFL has it figured out.
Props to football. There's never been a bad anthem as far as I can tell in football at any level. Whereas I was watching a video. If you watched the Home Run Derby last night, you know what I'm talking about.
Oh man,
there were 3 bad ones that they highlighted: basketball, baseball, basketball, and then of course Home Run Derby last night. 4 worst anthems of all time. Good job.
Which
NFL.
home run derby anthem singer posted on Instagram? Hey, I was drunk as hell. I'm checking myself into rehab. I'm so sorry.
I was hammered. I'm sorry. Yes.
Which, gotta respect it a little bit after that apology. It's okay. I get it. Happens.
She started singing. I immediately looked at my wife. I was like, "Is this real life?" And then it got worse. I was like, "How did this?" I was like, I looked at my wife. It got worse, and I said, "What were her credentials?"
She has sang before. We know that for
She's
sure.
Grammy or Emmy nominated. Like,
oh man,
buddy.
Anyway, quite the episode. The big dudes in the trenches. What a way to come back. A lot of
Absolutely.
reading long lists of things. Hopefully you guys found it interesting because we had a good time putting it together.
And guess what? I forgot to scroll across the bottom.
That's what we need.
Oh man,
that's what we've been missing.
it is what we've been missing.
It's the only thing.
But
oh, geez, I'm kidding.
We do have some links to read off here, and they're now scrolling across the bottom. They've
cool.
not been the rest of the episode, so my bad on that. Oh, brother. All right. So you can check us out and donate to the show. Help us do better, be better, have more things to talk about, have more money to put out a better product for you. Head on over to patreon.com/BDT football. If you're watching us on Twitch, congratulations, you found us. If you're watching us somewhere else and you want to catch the stream live, or if you're listening, you want to catch us live, head on over to twitch.tv/big dudes in the trenches. You can follow us on Twitter or X at twitter.com/BDT football, or just search at BDT football, facebook.com/BDT football, instagram.com/BDT _football. Trying to get some stuff going both of those places. BDTfootball.com. If you're wanting to write some blogs, let us know. We'll put them up there. And I think we'll do a little bit of writing there potentially coming up here soon. We also have our YouTube where we are also live, youtube.com. Just search Big Dudes in the Trenches. And then we have a Discord where you can come, hang out, talk, and I think we're going to be trying to put together a college football dynasty. So you definitely want to check us out there and join in the conversations. Discord.gg/9G capital X 3PT capital G 36 capital E suck it tug.
All right. And with that, that's all we have for the show.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, Bug.
Why does Ariel wear seashells?
I have heard this before.
She outgrew her bee shells.
Yeah. Yeah.
We doing Tug's thing?
No, but I also want to throw in there. I am amazed that they're still together after all the shit that they've been through. I'm talking about your butt cheeks.
We will see y'all next time. Hopefully it will not be this long of a break. I've had a lot of fun tonight. Peace out, Girl Scout. See you later.